And I was telling this life coach, this very successful life coach, kind of my sob story, like why it was so hard to get clients, why nothing was working. And what she said to me is, well, she asked me a question. She said, well, who's mentoring you? And I said, well, nobody, obviously. I don't have enough money for a mentor. And she looked at me and she said something I'll never forget. She said, that is the exact problem that would be solved if you hired a mentor. About 6.5 years ago, I was homeless, living in my car in Los Angeles. And it was not a nice car. I was not sleeping in my Lamborghini, I'm gonna tell you that. It was a Honda Accord. I got into a really low place in my life because about 6 months prior to that, I was a pastor. I was a pastor working at a church, evangelical church. And while I was in school studying the Bible at a graduate school level, I actually realized that career wasn't for me. In fact, that I just wasn't a religious person anymore as I had been for much of my life up to that point. It brought me to this like dark emotional place as a result of that, unfortunately, or fortunately, as we'll see here soon. And it was during that time that I decided I needed to figure out a different career where I could perform the same value for people, which was to help people. I wanted a career that really helped people in a big way, which is why I was previously a pastor, but that helped people in their lives here and now instead of trying to get to some afterlife experience thing. And so my first business, while I was still living in my car, was a fitness coaching company. That first business, I had no entrepreneurial experience. I obviously had no money, and I didn't know anybody else that was good at this either. So I had a lot of and I had no certification. Like I decided to be a fitness coach. I wasn't a certified personal trainer. I was just a guy who'd gotten in good shape. And then other people said I should be a trainer. Like that was the whole reason I got into it. But I will say, with the help of mentors in that first year, and this is so key for me to zero in on, is with the help of mentors, people that had been there, done that, made it happen already. I went from zero to making over $285,000 in my first year of being an entrepreneur. As I moved into my second year in business, I had several people that were trainers ask me to help coach them on their business, because I don't know if you know this, Garrett, but it's not normal for trainers to make multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars at all, let alone their first year.
I do know this.
You do?
I mean, I wasn't a personal trainer, but you do the math at whatever, $60 a pop hourly. It doesn't quite add up. You can't work enough hours to get to that kind of level of success. But anyways.
Yeah. And most trainers aren't fully booked anyway. So the average trainer in the United States anyways makes $20,000 a year. I mean, they don't get into it for the money. They get into it because it's passion. It's a personal passion of helping other people improve their lives, improve their health. So in that second year, I had enough trainers reach out to me and say, hey, can you support me in the business side of it? Because I see you doing well and I want to do the same. So I started to add business coaching to what I was doing. And about halfway through that second year in business, I had become a millionaire. I started making a couple $100,000 a month. By the end of that second year, I'd made $1.68 million. Education businesses, particularly because mine was online. It was all online from the beginning. And I should mention that, make sure that's clear. It's a really high margin business. I just did very well in it. In 18 months from when I was homeless, 18 months later, I was a millionaire.
Let's back up a bit. So you were literally in a car.
Yeah. For 5 months, I lived in my car.
For 5 months. How did you get to live in your car?
Well, it's because I was a pastor. And so my only income came from fundraising from the church at that time. And that's what I'd been for several years. So I didn't really have much good job experience, except for my previous job was as a server in a restaurant, and I'd been fired from two different restaurant jobs.
Sure.
It wasn't exactly a good resume to hand in.
Yeah, right. Like I'm a pastor. There's not a lot of like transitionary experience necessarily in the job world with that, right?
Right.
So then you got to that point, and then how did you attract or seek out a mentor that would actually work with you to get you to that level?
Yeah, let's talk about that. That's a great question. I went to a Tony Robbins event towards the end of 2015. And that's when I became homeless. Like I started living in my car in October 2015. And instead of paying rent that month, I chose to go to an Unleash the Power Within event because I thought that it would provide more value to my life based on where I'd been stuck. Tony, on the third day, I mean, this is like a crazy event. It's 50 hours long. I don't know if you've ever been to one of his events, but it is like 12 hours a day, 4 days in a row, very intense. On day 3, he said, if you take nothing else from this entire event, but this one phrase I'm about to tell you, then you'll have more than gotten your money's worth using it, applying it in your life. He said, proximity is power, and who you surround yourself with is who you'll become. And I latched onto that phrase. I realized in that moment that why I was struggling in every area is because anyone close to me was also struggling. And so it became the obsession of my life then on that I was going to get around people that were performing performing in better ways than I was, and so that I could learn something from them. At first, I knew that these people might not want to be friends with me because I didn't have equal value to offer, but I would find ways to help them so that they wanted to be friends with me. As a result of that, I started connecting with other coaches that were successful. And at the time, people that I knew were living down in San Diego, in Encinitas area. So this is just north of the city of San Diego. And one night we were having this late night gathering party, whatever. And I was telling this life coach, this very successful life coach, kind of my sob story, like why it was so hard to get clients, why nothing was working. And what she said to me is, well, she asked me a question. She said, well, who's mentoring you? And I said, well, nobody, obviously. I don't have enough money for a mentor. And she looked at me and she said something I'll never forget. She said, that is the exact problem that would be solved if you hired a mentor. In that moment, it was like a light bulb went off. My problem wasn't that I didn't know how to make money. The problem wasn't that I didn't have money. It was that I didn't know how to make money on demand whenever I needed it. And so I decided that I was going to get a mentor, even if no matter what I had to do, no matter how much debt, whatever I had to do, ask people, beg people to mentor me, because then that would solve the problem permanently. I could always make the money and pay the person back that lent to me. So I asked her for a recommendation. She gave me one, and I borrowed the first $2,500 to pay for the first month to work with this business mentor from my dad. It was super embarrassing for me. I'd always kind of this is part of why I was homeless. Like I didn't want to ask my family for anything. Like I had just too much pride to have them know that I was struggling. But at this one, I was like, screw my pride. Like, I got to get this help. So he lent me the money, thank goodness. And that first month, I went from making roughly a little less than $1,000 a month, which I'd made over the previous several months, to then making $4,000 that first month working with him, which was enough to pay back my dad, but not enough to pay for the second payment to work with this mentor. And I'm telling you that because I remember at the beginning of that second month, started getting calls from the guy, hey, are you going to pay or I'm going to kick you out if you don't? I didn't have any money. I'd already maxed out my credit cards. Those were still not being paid at this point. So I remember it was 2:00 on a Thursday afternoon. And I asked myself, what am I going to do? Am I going to go back to trying this on my own? That didn't work so well before. Or am I going to find a way here? So by 9 p.m. that night, someone handed me $4,000 cash and drove away with my Honda Accord. I had sold my car, put up an ad on Craigslist, sold my car, so that the next day I could go to the bank, deposit the money, and send that to the mentor. This became my all or nothing moment. Like I was going to find a way to make it work. And I was burning the ship, so to speak, to make that possible. That next month, I then made $12,000, just continuing to execute on what I was learning from that mentor. And my income slowly grew every single month after that because I continued to invest in other mentors, other speakers, making $16,000, $19,000, $17,000, $18,000. 6 months after making that second payment, after selling my car, I made $100,000. And my life could never be the same again after that. I became obsessed with getting around people that were doing better or had some sort of secret sauce or something that I didn't have access to. And that became my number one way to shortcut time to get results faster than I'd ever thought was possible prior to that.
Wow. So you literally sold your car. You're like, all right, this mentor is going to help me understand some kind of piece of knowledge. And you're like, I have to act on whatever this is essentially. Now, is this mentor in that space you wanted to go in, or was it just like a general mentor? I mean, how did they?
Well, no, this was specifically a business mentor for online personal trainers.
Got it.
So it was very niche to like what I wanted to build. And he'd already helped, I don't know, at least 100 other people grow businesses prior to this time. So I knew that he knew what he was talking about.
Got it. So you were able to get time with this person, and then you started executing on the plan. I mean, you didn't even have like startup costs or anything like that with the what was going on. It was just kind of listening to this guy, and then you figured out a way to maneuver around that. That's incredible.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about coaching businesses is just sharing information from person to person. So there really is no startup costs. It's just like if you can execute and deliver the value, then you can get paid for that information, so to speak, for that service. Yeah. I mean, that's service businesses. Yeah.
So then you took that and then you invested in other mentors outside of that as well. You just kind of kept doubling down on that, create almost this like new like top 5 friend group, right? So like they say, the average of the 5 people, whatever, you created that by basically paying your way to have different mentors be those people for you. That sound about accurate?
Yes, that's right. Yes, because I knew that whatever money I would invest in the mentors over time, it would yield me the best return rather than anything else. Like, of course, much better than paying for an upgraded lifestyle or keeping more cash in the bank at that particular time. That was where I was going to yield the best return, is like learning how to sell, learning how to structure offers, learning how to deliver value, hire a team, like all those things. I didn't know how to do any of that. I had no background. Nobody in my family did. So it's like I had to learn it, and to learn it quickly. To get somebody's devoted, qualified attention, you need to give them money for that.